Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
We are live, episode 354 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate it. It is Friday, 8:30 p.m. on Friday the 13th. Let's go around and see what everybody is drinking, starting with Rob. Rob, actually, where are you and what are you drinking?
Today I am in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and I currently have a Trilha triple flower power. It's a triple IPA. From a brewery nearby that I was drinking at a couple of days ago.
I kind of feel like this means that we have had a host in every continent but Africa at some point while being on this show. Wendy, what do you got over there?
I am drinking a strawberry Bruleus from Drafting Table.
Well, what a coincidence about Drafting Table, because I don't know if you guys knew, but they released an alt beer.
I saw that.
Which, thanks to our editor-in-chief, Mr. Edwin Norton, he picked up a 4-pack for me, and then I am washing it down with a nice Bell's Amber. I went to Kroger, saw a 6-pack of Killian's for like $7. I'm like, you know what? That sounds great. And like I turned around and Bell's Amber was on sale, and I put the Killian's right back, grabbed the Bell's Amber, and I was happy to have made that decision. That's for sure. No offense to Killian's. I do love my Killian's Irish Red. That's like a the OG craft beer to me. But it is Friday the 13th. Let's have a little fun. What are we watching? Horror movie wise, are we horror movie fans? What are we into? I'll kind of start off. I love all of the haunting TV shows. I was gonna say it's Ryan Murphy, but it's not Ryan Murphy. Who's the guy that does the haunting on Hill House, the haunting of Versace family or something like that? Like it's all the Netflix shows. Midnight Mass he did. Like those are so much fun. Like I love extended horror. American Horror Story is always good too. I'm definitely more of a TV horror guy. What about you, Rob? Are you a horror guy? Like do you like horror movies, horror shows?
Not really. I watch them when they're on, but I don't think I've ever selected one to watch. that kind of thing. I used to work with a guy who I stopped working with him because he quit his job and became a horror movie director. So that was kind of cool. Last I checked, he's still directing movies up in Chicago, but I haven't watched any of his stuff.
So it wasn't Ryan Murphy, as I mentioned. It was Mike Flanagan. So the Flaniverse, I think, is what they call it, which is the haunting of Bly Manor, the haunting of Hill House, the fall of Usher, not Versace, and Midnight Mass. Easily some of the best TV I've ever seen. I'm definitely not into the gore porn, so I don't watch like the Saw movies or Hostel. I do love a good horror flick, a good thriller. All the new Jordan Peele movies are good, which somebody made a fun little reference saying that he's making it impossible for people to Google search the name of his movies because it's been Get Out, Us, Nope, and the next one's called Him. So he's not really making it easy. Wendy, what about you?
Yes, I will watch it. I do like American Horror Story. I loved The Fall of the House of Usher. That was an awesome one. I will read horror books, but I am not a big fan of the like thrasher gore type movies. So
what if it's like super campy? Like it's bloody, but it's not blood, like a claymation campy.
So do you remember the movie Trick or Treat?
With the R, like the backwards R or whatever. Yeah.
It was like all like metal 80s type metal music in it. That one was one of my favorites when I was younger. And I think it was literally just because of all the music that was in it. But that kind of stuff I would watch. And I'll watch a horror movie, but I'm not really big on... I won't pick one out to watch. Mainly because I still can't pull my car up to a railroad track. If I'm the first car at a railroad track, I will stay like 3 or 4 cars back because of the what was the one?
Final
where they-
Destination.
Final Destination, where they train people. It's very-
We're losing your mic, Wendy.
Are you still here?
Yep, we're still here.
Am I still here?
You're still there. Yeah,
You're
you sounded very echoey.
I don't know what's going on with my stuff today. But yeah, I'm that person. So I think of that every single time, which it doesn't make any sense because I have no problem getting in a tanning bed. But that particular one, the train and the logs, I can't get past.
Yeah, the logs.
The logs, I think, is like a generational thing. I think everybody remembers like when they go behind a semi full of large like tree logs, like the first thing that goes, like they go to an airport, they don't think Final Destination. They go to a roller coaster, like a theme park, they don't think Final Destination 2. I think that one is. Like, but that the logs on the back of a truck, I swear to God, everyone knows it, everyone remembers it. Everyone is simply like mortified when they see it. I want to show you guys a quick little photo though, because this was at the beginning of COVID. And I literally, this is the only time I've ever been like super scared in real life. And it's solely because of this right here. I'm in a Kroger parking lot. It's COVID, like the beginnings of COVID, April 2020. And this fucking red balloon drifts in front of my goddamn car. And I have never bolted so fast out. Like, I think I was waiting for the food to get like delivered into my trunk. And I left. I came back like 10 minutes later because they were still so far behind that it took like 2 hours for food to like past your pickup time to get it at that time.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I had never been that scared in my life in person until something like that happened. Like I've been like scared, like, oh, this is kind of creepy. Or like a kid, like, you know, you turn off the lights and you got to run to your room before the monster gets you. That we all had, but never told each other about. But yeah, so that's the new It was very, very good. But you said horror books, Wendy. What are some horror books that you've liked?
Oh, just like Stephen King. I read Stephen King I probably way too early. I think I was like 9 or 10 the first time I read a Stephen King book. And I started with Pet Sematary, which probably didn't make sense for somebody so young because it seems real. But yeah, those are my favorites. I'm not a big fan of the Gunslinger series because I'm not as big on the sci-fi stuff. But the horror things like that, those ones I like. The Shining is one of my favorite books to this day. I've probably read it 100 times.
If Dan was on this show, we could talk a little bit. There is a game out there that's called an asymmetrical horror. It's called Dead by Daylight, and it allows you to play as either a survivor or a killer. And there is a character based on the Gunslinger, and I had never heard of the Gunslinger before. But they created, so they'll make either actual copyrighted characters. Well, they'll get the license, so you could play as Chucky from the Chucky movies or Child's Play movies. You could play as Michael Myers. You could play as the cannibal from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So there's plenty of different characters that you can play with. But the Gunslinger I had never heard of until somebody mentioned that it's based off of the Stephen King lore of the Gunslinger. So that was a lot of fun to see. What about, I brought up video games. I know I'm more of the gamer versus you two for sure. Have you guys gotten into any of the casual scary video games like a Five Nights at Freddy's or Slender Man or anything like that?
No, I'm not helping you out much here.
The only reason I know what either of those things are is because I face paint.
Oh, okay.
And kids always want to have some type of Five Nights at Freddy. I'm not really, Slender Man's kind of hard to paint. So I don't know how they want me to do that, but I've had that request as well.
Yeah, the Five Nights at Freddy. Well, they made a movie with Joshua Hutcherson. I think that's the right Joshua. Peeta Mellark from the Hunger Games movies. But yeah, that's for me. I do love horror movies. I love campy. I will look at a movie, and if it's got a stupid name, I'll be like, you know what, I'm in. Like I saw a movie called Space Sharks, and it was awful, and not even like awful good like Sharknado. Like it was just awful. Like this movie got made kind of like how Rebecca Black's Friday music video got made. Like someone had money and invested in it, and that's about it.
I had some friends in high school and earlier, but in high school they worked for a video store, which is how old I am. But they would always find the dumbest horror movie titles and share them with us, and usually rent them themselves too. But I remember Texas Microwave Massacre as one of them, which is just, I don't know how you go around massacring people with the microwave except maybe hitting them.
Well, it's kind of like how there's Thanksgiving, which is the demonic turkey that goes around killing people. There's Hubcap, which is, I believe, the story of a murderous tire, like a sentient tire wheel that runs around and kills people.
Well, Christine is just the whole car.
Yeah, there's plenty of great B-level, C-level horror movies that again, they take the gore and it's super campy, kind of like the original Evil Dead. Like, you've ever seen the original?
That's what I was going to bring up. That's, my friends turned me on to that, and from that we watched Evil Dead 2, which is basically a remake, but super campy and on purpose.
They've also like remade Evil Dead like 3 times recently too, and then they also had the TV show of like Ash versus Evil Dead. And then the comics will take it even further, because there's like Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, and like Ash will be an actual like enemy to Freddy and Jason Voorhees. Like there's some crazy stuff that gets into the books. That's why I was curious, because you said horror. I don't know if you get into like the what are they called? I was about to say trade paperback, but it's a comic book, but it's a bigger,
the graphic novel.
Graphic novel. That's the words I was looking for. Fucking COVID brain. No, you don't. Okay.
Don't it isn't Evil Dead have a like a live show that comes around?
I think there's an Evil Dead Broadway, or like an Evil Dead theater production. That definitely exists. I don't know if it's kind of like over the top, even more ridiculous than like the Beetlejuice theater production.
Like you have to wear a raincoat if you're close enough.
This is Gallagher here.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to that. I remember getting tickets right before COVID, and then I think they had to cancel it, or I don't remember. Beetlejuice, though, the theater production of Beetlejuice was amazing. It was way better than I expected it to be.
Yeah, we saw the touring one a year ago. And it got me, because Julia took me to go see Hamilton, because I really wanted to see Hamilton. And that was more for me. And then when I took her to see Beetlejuice, she loved it. So I had to take her to go see my favorite, which is Book of Mormon.
Oh, yes. Also, also a very good one.
That's my stupid claim to fame, is I got to see it in Chicago with Ben Platt. Nice. even though it wasn't Josh Gad and Andrew Rannells, it was Ben Platt as Josh Gad's character, and it was perfect for the right amount of spot. In our chat on Twitch, because we're live 8:30 p.m. on Fridays on Twitch, Kick, YouTube, Facebook, says he's not a fan of horror, but it likes shows like The Bates Motel and Hannibal. What about like horror-ish thriller TV shows like Mindhunter? Kind of taps into that a little bit, where it's, it's horror, but it's not really like gruesome, grotesque. Like it's more a psychological thriller. Does that speak to either of you?
Yeah, definitely more thriller. I like that one a lot. There's one similar vibe, I think. I totally forgetting the name of it, but based on a video game HBO series. God, I wish I could remember the name of it. It's a zombie movie, but it barely has any zombies in it. I'll find it.
Zombie movie, barely any zombies, based on a video game.
Yeah.
The Last of Us.
The Last of Us. That's the one.
I was like,
Yeah.
what? Like, it took me a minute to. Yeah, Bats McGee got it too. Like you said,
Yeah.
zombies, and I'm like, zombies. But they're like, if you've
They're
never,
infected, you know.
yeah, they're infected with mushrooms or fungi. So you like Mindhunter? Is there any other thriller, type shows that you lean towards, or I guess what do you lean towards if it's not those?
A lot of sci-fi fantasy.
I mean, that kind of hits thriller a lot.
It can, yeah. The Expanse would be one of those that has quite a few spooky and thrilling bits to it, of not knowing what's coming around the corner or who's coming after you and all that.
My fiance and I were watching The Ark on Peacock, which I think it's on Sci-Fi, and she's telling me like every single one of these shows has to have like an alternate universe episode and hailing call from a different ship episode, and all these, like, there's these story arcs that have to occur in all of these sci-fi space travel type shows. We've seen the Orville, a bunch of episodes of the Orville, which I think they just renewed too. That's the Seth MacFarlane one. What about you, Wendy? Is you were kind of nodding your head when we said Mindhunter.
Yeah, I do like the thriller stuff. A lot of the books, I was just trying to think of some that I've read recently. I tend to just pick stuff based on what I see people are reading and they like. So sometimes I'll like order something too from the library, and it takes like 3 months for me to get it, and I forgot that what I picked it for. So I never know sometimes what I'm going to read until I start reading it. So I guess that's my own little thriller, because you never know.
Are you at the point where, like, for me, whenever I'm watching a movie or a TV show, like, I feel pot committed, like I have to finish it. But Julia was telling me that, like, there's times where she gets like halfway through a book and she's like, nah, I'm not feeling it. And she's going to doesn't finish it. I'm like, how do you not finish something?
No, if I can't keep it, if it doesn't keep me interested, I have to move on. I've stopped reading 3 books this week.
Wow.
If that tells you anything. 3 books.
I haven't even started reading 3 books this year.
I got them from the library, and I was like, there's somebody waiting for this one. They can read it, because there's no way I'm going to finish it in time.
Yeah, I've definitely had a few books I haven't gotten into, and so abandoned. But I usually give them a good chunk of time first.
No, I can't. Sometimes, I mean, I'll give it about a quarter of the way through. If people tell me that it's really promising, like there was that, what's that, Court of Thorn and Roses? That one is definitely the second book is better. So you have to muddle your way through the first book to get to the second one, in my opinion. So sometimes if I hear things like that, I'll keep going, but nope, I have no problem abandoning a book. I've got too many books to read to just keep reading something that I don't like.
I might not watch like a second season of something, but I'll at least give a TV show. I might not watch like the second movie of a trilogy or something like that, but at least with a TV show or a movie or something like that, like I don't think I've ever quit on a movie or a show on purpose. And I've gone back and I've watched a lot of stuff that I've not purposefully quit, but just like time commitment. Like I've got all the other things I want to watch. What's the one with, I was about to say Josh Hawley, but that's not it. And then I was going to say Josh Jackson, but that's not it. It's the guy from Lost that was in the sci-fi show on USA. Oh my God. I feel like it was actually pretty decent too. But it was like an alien invasion type TV show. And when I started rewatching it, that was a lot of fun. But you know what is really, really good? And if you guys haven't seen it yet, all the seasons except for the most recent one are on Netflix. Evil, starring the guy from Luke Cage, whose name I don't know, and also starring the guy from Lost, who played Benjamin Linus, whose name I don't know. I know all these actors in all these other movies, but I don't know exactly where they're from. Or I know where they're from, I just don't know what the hell their names are.
It's starting to sound like a conversation with me, because I can't remember anybody's name or the name novels and books and shows anymore. I just had to look up You because I'm like, well, that was a series that I really liked. I like the books, and I thought they did the series really well, even though they changed it a lot.
Well, this is a craft beer podcast. Let's talk a little bit about craft beer. I did see that, Rob, you had an article in the doc. Did you want to talk about something today?
Sure, but I want to start with my craft beer experience here in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, talk about it.
Which starts with the trip to the Eagles game. I guess technically Eagles and Packers game. Eagles won. But I lucked into that where a couple of the people who came down, one guy turned out is from Philly, and he was super excited to be down this particular week. And another guy loves to do stuff like that. So he got us all tickets to the game. He rented a limo to get us out to the game. And then we got there. It took us 2.5 hours to drive what looks like it is an hour in light traffic. It took us 2.5 hours for that one. We got there as the game was starting. And I spent a good part of the first quarter trying to figure out how to buy beer at the stadium.
What was so complicated about it?
They had these large beer stands set up on the main loge level that we were on. And they had devices where you could order your beer there, but the devices weren't turned on. I would see people go up to the stand to get beer, but the people working the stand only spoke Portuguese, and I do not speak Portuguese. And so I couldn't figure out how they were getting beer or why they were getting beer. But that's where I saw that they had cold beer in cans and ice there. And they kept pointing me downstairs to where the concessions was. So I went down to concessions, and again, they had those devices, and you order your beers on the devices. So I figured that out. I ordered 4 beers for all of us. Turns out you can only carry 2 at a time, just like in the US. But a friend helped, a new friend that I made there at the concession stand helped me. And then the problem was that they didn't have cold beer at that place. But some lady nearby who spoke English, she was explaining to me that they don't like cold beer here in Sao Paulo. It's kind of hit or miss. But they do like cold beer, but maybe not at the stadium. But that there was cold beer upstairs, and she kind of gave me directions back to where I was trying to get beer before. So I figured I had to pay for my beer down there, and then I could go upstairs and get beer from those stands where I couldn't figure out how to get beer from. But they sent me back downstairs again. So I picked up my beer. I was walking around with this receipt. I picked up my beer, and they kept saying gelada, and I later learned that means iced beer. But they were actually saying they don't have iced beer there. So I brought 4 warm Coronas back to everybody in the stands, who at this point, I believe the Packers had scored 2 field goals by this point already. And so they were ready for beer. So that was my first real Sao Paulo beer experience, was that it was very difficult to get beer at the stadium. We ended up drinking some warm Budweiser, and then more warm Corona, and then they ran out of Corona, so more warm Budweiser.
Why do you think they drink warm beer? Did you get an answer?
I did not get an answer. This lady was so sure of it, but now I'm in my hotel. I've been in Sao Paulo for a while. I've got my feet under me. I understand what's going on and how to get around a bit. I have had cold beer everywhere else I've been. It's either been served in a bucket of ice, with the bottle in a bucket of ice, or it's Schulp. It's on tap.
I was just going to ask about that.
Yeah, I've had a couple of places where it's been on tap. That's not as common unless I'm going to a beer bar, which there are plenty of, but the people I'm traveling with aren't so into it.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. And the other one, I have been told, it was asserted very strongly that the Brazilian beer is Original. It's Antarctica Original, which is owned by InBev now. I don't know much else about it beyond that, and I would say it's good, but it's similar to Budweiser or others where it's good, but it's very available. So that was the football beer experience. Otherwise, I was at Trilha a couple of days ago. That's where I picked up a bunch of beer to go from there, and that's been tiding me over here. But I ran into two kind gentlemen at the bar who spoke wonderful English. One of the bartenders, she spoke very good English, but then she was off shift shortly after I sat down. And the other people, my Portuguese is now good enough that I know how to get another beer, my Zoom. and the other gentleman helped me out. They had lots of recommendations of beers I should drink, but I only had so much time to drink the beer and get back to the hotel.
So you had a good. When do you get back?
I leave for the airport in about 10 hours.
Oh, okay. So you got one more sleep, and then you're heading back to the United States.
Yep.
So there's all kinds.
Go on, Wendy.
There was all kinds of news about the safety of the football players in Sao Paulo. Have you run across anything like that? Like, are you traveling with somebody that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's 4 of us here for work. And usually we're out in at least pairs. Sometimes it's all 4 of us. Sometimes it's just 3 of us. One guy's more of a homebody. But I have actually, the area I'm in, everybody keeps telling me wherever I go, they ask, which neighborhood are you in? And I tell them, but I always have to look it up because I can't remember. It's Nova something or other. And they say, oh, that's the nicest area in town. And everywhere I've gone, I've seen people walking by themselves. I've seen lady with their purses, dangling off the side of them, kind of half open. And so I figure, okay, well, this can't be a bad area if people are walking around like this. So I haven't had any problems here. The one time that was when I went on a tour with one other guy. Everybody else just kind of stayed home. This was like a Sunday thing that we did. He hired a car with a tour guide that drove us around town. And we found out later, because we went to the cathedral, big cathedral, beautiful, very Catholic area. And so they were all very proud of it. Tons of homeless outside because they were feeding the homeless. The church was feeding the homeless at that time. And then he took us to a market. Well, we found out that area is also known as Cracolandia, which I had a big advice not to go to Cracolandia. and when we told that's, in case you didn't catch it, that's short for Crackland, for like the drug.
Right.
They said crack is no longer the problem. Now it's meth and ketamine are the problem. So they might have to rename it. But then we went to a market after the cathedral, and we parked somewhere. It was a guarded parking lot, and the guide said, yeah, he preferred to park in this parking lot. And we walked by some pretty sketchy lean-tos against the wall and things like that, but it still didn't feel like a problem. We went to this nice market, had a great meal, great beer there, overlooking this whole farmer's market. We got to try fresh fruit and things. We brought back Atamoya, which is a wonderful fruit that's got kind of a pear texture, almost a kind of a cherry flavor to it. It was delicious. It's really sweet. And when we were telling our local colleagues this, they said, oh, well, you have a badge of Sao Paulo now. We're afraid to go there because that was in the middle of Cracolandia.
There's been plenty of times where I've done some travel where people will look at me like, what are you doing over there? Like, why are you in this area? Speaking of horror movies, Barbarian starring Justin Long, it comes to mind because it's portrayed in Detroit, but it's in like one of the really awful parts of Detroit. And so like all the houses are run down around it, except for this one Airbnb house that's like available. And it's quite an interesting show. But when I went to San Antonio, I picked up an Airbnb for Dan and I, because him and I were down there, and I had like separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms, separate everything, which is like a shared community space. And it was cheaper than us, getting an expensive hotel in downtown San Antonio or 2 hotel rooms somewhere else. So we did it, and I was like, oh, we'll just walk to the game because we're over by the Alamo Dome. And the guy who lives in San Antonio was like, what are you doing over there? Why, I wouldn't walk there. Sure as shit, I'm confident everything's going to be fine. We wind up taking an Uber, and as we're getting out of the house and into the Uber, you just see this swarm of people walking by and constantly walking by to the Alamo Dome. I'm like, nobody's going to fucking do anything here. But talking about not scary areas, but I want to go back because on Twitch, Anthony Ross says, warm domestics. I know, Wendy, you definitely get out to other countries and stuff. Rob, you as well. Is this something? Because I've known like warm beer engines, but like warm Bud Light is a completely different ball game. Have you guys seen this before anywhere else, or?
No.
No, I have not seen it anywhere.
I mean, they don't serve it as cold as we do, but
Right.
they still serve it chilled.
Well, we try to serve it so cold that it doesn't taste like anything. It just
Right. Like we
Yeah.
don't even like beer.
And there was the Tiger beer in Singapore that came in frozen mugs that were already full of ice cubes.
Well, and the whole point of the Schopp beer is to keep it colder longer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, and I love that. I think that's awesome. I would love to be in Brazil drinking one personally.
Well, I think I'm coming back in October. I'm almost definitely coming back in November.
That would be my goal, though. It's if I go to when I go to Brazil, the first thing I want to do is get a Schopp beer in Brazil.
Most people here have told me I need to go to Rio. So apparently Sao Paulo isn't the first destination to think of if you're going to Brazil.
No, I've had 3 different exchange students from Brazil. So Recife is where I was told that I need to go because it's where Carnival is.
I think that's a tough time to visit,
Yeah.
but it would be a lot of fun.
I haven't left the country in a decade, so I can't really say much.
I had that warm beer on beer engines in England a couple months ago. It was great. It was the most wonderful thing.
Most of my leaving the country involves islands, though. So, like in 2 weeks, I'll be in the Bahamas.
Mine keeps involving work, so I only have so much time to myself.
I mean, the opportunity. I was going to say the opportunity to go see a football game, like an NFL game, is pretty.
Right.
Yeah, the first NFL game in South America, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Or at least
and you
in Brazil.
just happened to be there.
Happen to be
Right.
there.
I just imagine if it was like a team that you actually rooted for.
Yeah, you're right. Someone I care a little bit about the Packers, but yeah, I was there with an Eagles fan. We couldn't really root against them, although we did every time the Packers score. We let him know.
But there was an article you wanted to talk about, so you gave us a little bit about the trip. What did you want to talk about today?
Right. So the article that I found it felt like a filler article for the website. Even it was from foodandwine.com, and it was the best cheap beer that recommended by chefs. And the premise was, what beer do chefs like to drink after work? And a couple of the things that I thought were standouts was that of the 50 people surveyed, 20 of them go for a beer after work. A lot of people responded that they don't actually have a preference for what they're looking for after work. And then some of them look for beer with stuff in it, the very flavorful, like pastry stouts and those sorts of things. But what I took away from it mostly is
Stuff in it.
Yeah, beer with stuff in it.
Is that what they call it?
No, that was definitely me editorializing.
Okay.
But what I thought was interesting about it, or worth asking, is it being after work a consideration for you? Does that change what sort of beer you would be looking for, or is that just kind of a weird premise, or is that a premise because these are chefs who have presumably been in a hot kitchen all day, working pretty hard?
Well, it might be because they're, refined taste buds to where maybe they're looking for a specific post-work taste. When I'm working, like after work, I just if I want a beer, I want a beer. Like, I don't want a craft beer. I don't want an X beer. I just want a beer. Like, and usually if I'm asking for a beer, I already had a really shitty day at work at that point. Like,
Right.
When I was in my early 20s, I would go for like beers after work, but that was also because I was in my early 20s and I didn't have much to to worry about. I didn't have rent to pay or wedding to pay for. Like, got to be a little bit more fiscally responsible. Wendy, what about you? I
always want beer, so very rarely will you find me pick something other than a beer, unless there's just not a great option for beer.
I was gonna say like that, but the last time I said something like that, you called me out on the show for saying something like that.
What
about you saying that you just want a beer? You just always want a beer.
I do always want a beer. I'm not gonna lie. I like to drink beer.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just saying. I was about to say it. I'm like, oh, the last time I said that, I got yelled at on the show. The next
I didn't yell.
No. Constructive criticism. That's for sure. Better than some of the constructive criticism.
And it led to me getting my first level Cicerone. So, thank you. I guess.
You know what? You're welcome. I'm glad my life choices have helped you out so much.
Anyways, back to the whole topic. I don't know that things change what I want for a beer. I think I don't know what makes that decision for me, to be honest with you. I think it's what's available and what I might have at home or something along those lines. I tend to pick beers that I can't get first. Like beers that I don't see that often. But then there is, like when I go to Supernatural, I get the Heinz Park Hef if it's on. I know that I'm getting that no matter what. So I guess it depends on where I am and not necessarily what I'm doing.
I mean, I think we're all creatures of habit. I think there are points of places where we go to a specific place, we're always going to get the same thing. Like if we go to the same Buffalo Wild Wings, and for me, I think the biggest example would be I'm going to the bowling alley. And when I go to different bowling alleys, they all don't have the same choices. So depending on the bowling alley I'm going to, either I'm getting a Miller Lite on draft, or I'm getting a Labatt Light on draft, or I'm getting Guinness in a can. Like it all depends on the place. And because I always usually feel the same. Like I'm always happy to go bowling. I'm always excited to be there because it's bowling and I don't have, that's one of those things where, especially for me, like I could turn my brain off about everything else in the world. I've got 10 pins in front of me, 60 feet of wood and oil. I'm going to throw this 15-pound ball at 10 pins. Like that's one of those things where it's the opportunity to turn my brain off. And I don't want to be thinking about, ooh, what are the kind of notes? Am I getting biscuit? Am I getting this? I don't want to go to I would never want to go to like a brewery / bowling alley. Like that just seems like an awful thing, because when I go to a bowling alley, I want something different. It's kind of like when people go play golf. Like they don't want to think about the 800 things going on in their life. They just want to fucking play golf and drink. And it's usually whatever the caddy, or not caddy, the beer cart person is bringing them is just whatever they're going to drink or whatever they brought for the first place. Anthony in the Twitch says what's available and the environment you're in, which I think is kind of what I was talking about with the bowling alley. But is there something for you guys that are kind of like that?
Yeah, it's kind of, so when I travel for work, then I'm at customer sites. I actually go to an office then usually. And so that after work beer tends to be whatever I can find near the hotel or near the customer site. And yeah, it's just whatever looks interesting that I can find on Google Maps that's nearby. And down here, it's been whatever's within walking distance that looks like it has something interesting.
I'm the same way when I travel. No matter what I'm there for, I'm going to find something nearby that I can try out.
Yeah. When I'm at home, it's whatever I put in the upstairs fridge, planning ahead, but really it was probably just whatever I brought up and didn't drink the night before.
Yeah, and I think as Anthony says in our Twitch chat, like the environment matters a lot. Like if I'm going on a flight and I'm going into the Delta Lounge, nothing hits harder than that Kona Big Wave draft. Like I can just slam. But then when I'm in the plane and I know they have they'll have like Fat Tire or something like that. Then I'll go to Fat Tire. And then especially if I'm in the Delta Lounge in Dallas, like I'm slamming Shiner. Like it's the environment, not just the Delta Lounge, but the Delta Lounge at X Place or the airplane or the airport or whatever. Like all those things I think take into effect to where for me, like an after work drink when I used to drink after work would probably be like a Mick Amber or a Killian's or whatever is cheap, easy, and is going to get me a little buzz before I go home or go to the next bar, I should say. It was a rarity when I would go to like a brewery after work. Like I would it just never seemed a thing to do unless other people were going. Like I never went to breweries by myself back then.
Most of the breweries I've been to by myself.
Me too.
As I've gotten older, for sure, and traveling too, I can't tell you how many breweries I've been to in random, states and cities. Like, oh, there's a brewery around here. Let's go check it out. But when I was like in my 20 somethings, when in at least Metro Detroit, like your choices were Koonin, Dragon Mead, and Black Lotus. Because nobody went to Baraboo. No offense to Baraboo, but nobody went to Baraboo. That was definitely a more family-friendly brewery. So you went there like for dinner and drinks and everything. Whereas you went to Black Lotus to drink. You went to Dragon Mead to drink. You went to Koonin to drink. But I never went by myself. I just always had to go with someone else. Like it was just a weird thing to not do in my 20s. But I guess maybe you're a lot more social back then. And now we're just kind of old crotchety people that, I'm the oldest one on this show. But what were the results? What were some of the things that they wanted to drink?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't bring up the article.
We got sidetracked.
Yeah.
While he's looking that up, I will tell you, when I was in Put-in-Bay a couple weekends ago, I just had to look for a restroom, and because they were taking too long looking at shops before we headed to the pool bar, and I went to the brewery because where else would I go? Like I knew they had a bathroom, and they were like texting me while I was in there, like, where are you? We can't find you. And I come out of the brewery and my friend's like, why did we not think to look there first? I'm like, I don't know. It makes sense to me.
I have been to the brewery over in Put-in-Bay, but speaking of the environment, like Put-in-Bay, that's screw top Miller Lights. Like if I'm at the pool bar, I want screw top Miller Lights so I can, keep the top on and then drink when I want to drink and then go get another one. Like that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Did they have screw top Yuenglings?
No, but Yuengling was my drink of choice that entire weekend. And lots of shots. There was more shots than you could ever imagine.
When we went for my buddy's bachelor party like 15 years ago, I took them to their first ever drive-through liquor store, and they were like so excited to see that. And I'm just laughing because I had been to these places before, and they're like, "Oh my god, I can get this! I don't. This is you can drive through it." I also just learned there's 2 of them in Michigan. I did not know there was 2 in Michigan. There's one in Monroe, and then there's one more. So I'll definitely have to go check it out for sure.
There used to be one right down the street from me, but they shut it down.
The one I grew up with is closed. I'm very sad about it. It's now a preschool.
That's quite the turn. But what do these chefs want to drink?
First, I am drinking another Trilha. This one is the Coffee Time Barista, which is a cafe bourbon pink. I don't know what that means exactly. It's got lemon and yuzu in it. They like to drink Heineken, Miller High Life, Lone Star, Coors Banquet, Pabst Blue Ribbon, and Rainier, which sound very much like things that were available in the environment near the restaurant, right? Because they'd get out kind of late, bars would still be open.
Yeah, the bars that are open until 4 or serving until 4 are definitely only serving. They're geared towards the cigarette and a beer crowd.
Yeah, it looks like I have to give back credit. They did have a section in here titled "Beer with Stuff in It," but that is definitely a thing I say a lot. So I'm going to split the credit with them. the Modelo Especial with salt, chili, and lime, which is pretty delicious, and a Chelada by Budweiser. I do love Chelada. I don't like tomato juice. I do love Chelada.
Well, Wendy, what was the article you wanted to talk about today?
Well, I just kind of wanted to bring up the whole issue of Tilray laying off the entire Innovation Brewing team. I thought that was crazy. 1 year after purchasing it, I lost the article. 1 year after purchasing it, the 10 Barrel Brewing founders and brothers, Chris and Jeremy Cox, resigned from the brewery they created. And a week later was a mass layoff of the 10 Barrel Brewing's entire Innovation Brewing team. I just thought that was crazy. I just wondered what your guys' thoughts were on that. Like this article from the New School, newschoolbeer.com, does a really good job of kind of talking about the brewers and the team that got laid off and what they did for this brewery. So if you get a chance to check it out, definitely check that link and read the article, because I just think it's crazy. Like this brewery was so excited that they were no longer owned by AB InBev and that they could be independent brewing again. And then the people who allowed them to do that just got rid of the entire team.
That's interesting. I don't know where the Innovation Brewing part was. I was trying to read through the article to see that, but I've been to the 10 Barrel in the Pearl District in Portland. Had a wonderful time. This was when they were owned by AB InBev, and I was working with a guy who had never gone to a brewery before. He very rarely goes out after work, and I said to him, I'm going out to this brewery after work, and you're welcome to come along if you want to. And so he did, and he had no idea what to do. I ordered the beer flight. He ordered the beer flight with the exact same beers in it because he didn't know what to do. But he had such a wonderful time whenever I took a drink, he'd take a drink, and so it was fun. But I was telling him, these guys got bought by the big boy, and one of the people who worked there said, yeah, but we're still we operate independently. They just sell some of our beers. They use it to fill the shelves and push off the other craft breweries. So they were still pretty adamant they were independent when I was there, and the beers they were brewing were spectacular. They were really good. These were the ones, of course, that weren't the mass-produced on-the-shelf beers that were in the tap room.
Yeah, I'm for Tilray. This is kind of interesting because we were looking at all of the Tilray purchases as a way for them to have space in the United States, because I believe they're a Canadian company, but space in the United States where they could get ready for the potential legalization of marijuana and distribution of marijuana products across state lines. So I felt they were ready for this. What the innovation team is, if I had to guess, is that a lot of these breweries have multiple brew teams. So they'll have like the main brewery team that brews the bottled beers and everything like that. Kind of like how Blue Moon works. So if you've ever been to a Blue Moon facility in, Norco or what? Yeah, Colorado. But I was trying to remember the name of the town part of Denver. But if you've ever been there, like you get a bunch of different beers that aren't your standard Blue Moon. So they have like the Blue Moon beer team that makes Blue Moon and all these other beers that get distroed. But then at the actual facility is their quote unquote innovation team. And we've talked about people like Goose Island's got one. Modern Times had one. Firestone Walker, who I believe that's the person we spoke with when we had our interview, is we dealt with the brewer of the innovation team and not necessarily the main Firestone Walker lead brewer. So this just seems like they're downsizing their brew pub part of their world to just focus on the production and distribution instead of focusing on just a small restaurant that also serves the beer.
That's a shame. The Pearl, I don't know if you've been to the Pearl District, because that's where I think that would be. But I could see how it might be more competitive for them to try to run a brew pub there, because there's 10 or more other brew pubs probably within a couple of blocks. So I could see that to be a strategic choice, but it's a shame because they were making some excellent beer.
Yeah, it's kind of what happened, not what happened, but what could happen, I guess, since Atwater is no longer owned by Miller Coors, because Atwater in Grand Rapids, Atwater in Detroit, and Atwater in Grosse Pointe all have their own brew system. So they all have their own separate beers, separate of the main Atwater beers. So who knows what could happen with that after this resolution, because do you want to compete, say, in Grand Rapids against all the Grand Rapids breweries when you're Atwater? Do you want to compete, in Detroit, which you're going to compete in Detroit, but do you want to, have a bunch of innovation, or do you want to just, serve your beers because, people will come to the brewery and that's just your brewery? Like, for these places that have these multiple venues, it almost seems very scary, because they believed they were separate entities almost, because they're making their own different beers separate with the same name, the same, they're still 10 Barrel, but they were making all these different beers. But of course that's all speculation. Like I'm guessing based on the article, which we posted, it'll be posted in our show notes. I'm just guessing as to what could have happened. And it almost kind of makes me sound like I'm on Team Tilray, which I'm not. I don't want people to lose their job, and I don't want, less beer makers to be out there. But who knows? Maybe it's one of those things to where all these, these people who were massive, great beer makers at 10 Barrel go make their own, beer. They go to a different brewery and elevate that extra brewery instead of being handcuffed by Tilray. So who knows?
We saw this happen and talked about it recently with Cigar City also, where they laid off everybody in Tampa. Or
yeah, that's another one with Monster, because when you have that widespread amount of space to brew the beers, like you can technically brew Jai Alai up here in Comstock Park because it's Perrin. It's the same, it's Monster craft beer. You can go at Deep Ellum, I think is owned by Monster craft beer. Like all these facilities are owned by the same, to where they can make it without having to do it. And we see in Metro Detroit, at least, we know a little bit about it. When Roke purchased Dark Horse, sold their Roke's initial brewery to Eastern Market and moved everything to Dark Horse, because the Roke and Dark Horse production wasn't even as much as what Dark Horse was originally making at their production facility. So they can make it all at one space. So why do you have two places? You don't need a Roke brewery and a Dark Horse when you could just do it all at Dark Horse, which we will be at 4 Elf Day this year. As part of the final Ken tour. We're going to be recording live at 4 Elf. We hope, Rob, you come up there to Jackson, Michigan. But we had a blast the last time we were at 4 Elf. So I am excited to go back and catch up with John Rodopoulos, not Rondopoulos, Rodopoulos, Chuck, and plenty of others that we have. I've pronounced his name wrong so many times. It's kind of like the whole Baffin Boffin thing, where I mispronounced Boffin Brewery like 8,000 times on our show. They still like me, so at least that's good.
Baffin.
It's Baffin.
Okay, I was like,
I because nobody had ever said it, I kept calling it Boffin, and then somebody said it's Baffin, and I'm like, oh, and I could never fix it because I said it so many times incorrectly that so it's Baffin, not Boffin.
Dark Horse is still in Marshall, right?
Dark Horse is still in Marshall, not Jackson.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something I didn't know about yet.
No. Dark Horse is still in Marshall. We are working on a handful of great guests upcoming. I am super excited. We do have 2 live shows, so we won't be live on the 18th of October. That is the episode with Nick the Brewer we're bringing back. And Ian from Cellarman's, who we've had on a few times. I think I got an ESG cut for Ian from not a cellar. He's at Valentine Distilling now, I should say, where he actually works now. We're also doing the in-person show on 12/14, so December 14th at 4 Elf. We have also booked upcoming shows with it's Vivant drinks. I don't know what the new name of the
Vivant Spirits, isn't it?
Vivant Spirits, Vivant Drinks, Vivant everything, because they're no longer Brewery Vivant because they're fully expanded. So we're bringing on Vivant. Black Rocks is going to be coming on, which I'm super excited about. My God, it has been too long for us to finally get Holmes on this show. But Holmes will be on this show. We're going to be able to talk about Holmes, Simo, Troubadour, Smooge, and Stormcloud. And we've got a few more up our sleeve that we're going to be recording here soon. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm finishing my time here on the show with a bunch of Michigan breweries, which makes sense, at least for me.
That's all right. I'll bring up Indiana stuff to throw a little wrench in there once in a while.
That's fine. That's fine. So we got plenty of shows left to go throughout the rest of the year, which we'll be doing a little bit more once our schedule clears up. So be ready for a lot of October, November, and December shows. And then the show will continue after this. Just because I'm God doesn't mean that the show is going to end. But 9.5 years, I am spent. I am done talking about beer. I am done looking for beer. When you get into it like I did, I got into it a little too hard. So it'll be a nice reprieve. I'll still be around at festivals, so don't forget to say hi to me. And I'm still going to be running the Michigan Brewery Map app, which is free at mybeermap.com. Find over the 400 open breweries. Goddamn, 400 open breweries in the state of Michigan. We need to get one for Indiana, Rob. Let's you know anyone over at the Brewers Guild? Let's talk to these guys and
I think I got some people. Yeah.
See if we can get the second version of this app. My topic tonight was more so I wanted to talk about the horror stuff. The other topic I brought up was going to take easily its own show itself, so that might be a different day where we talk about the article from Beervana. That's BEERVANA. And we will talk about the reset, as they call it, at another episode. But that is going to do it. Episode 354 in the books. For myself, Rob, and Wendy, thank you so much. Now, guys, you're going to have to remember how to say this if you're going to continue the show. This is going to be in our little contract. But every show ends with, no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's better on draft. Have a good night.
Cheers.